Hey, CityCast Chicago, it's Michael Ziviak. While CityCast Chicago works hard every day to connect you with the stories that matter most, I'm working in the background making sure that our listeners are connecting with the best that Chicago has to offer. So what does that look like? It means meeting with the people who make Chicago what it is. The business owners, the stakeholders, the decision makers. The Chicagoans who put together those food festivals you enjoy, the concerts you attend, the exhibits you can't miss, and who make those candles your mom can't stop talking about. If this sounds like you, let me help you get your message out to the city's best audience with an ad right here on the CityCast Chicago podcast and on our sister daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. Shoot me an email at ads@citycast.fm and let's connect.
Today on CityCast Chicago, though the legislative session was supposed to end last week, lawmakers are still in Springfield working on a state budget and a few other outstanding issues. One of those lawmakers is Representative Nabila Syed, a Democrat from Northwest Suburban Palatine. At just 24, Syed is the youngest Democrat in the state house, and she's here to recap her first session. It's Wednesday, May 24th. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. Representative Syed, welcome to CityCast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
I appreciate you. I have to ask, what was the most surprising thing you learned or encountered during your freshman legislative session?
So many things. I think I've learned so many things every single day. I feel like I'm learning, I won't say too much, but it's a lot. It's up there. The most surprising thing I've learned is, I think before coming into this, the general sentiment about government is that like you're going to go there as a freshman legislator, you can't do anything. Mm-hmm. And I think that has been the biggest thing that I found to be, I wouldn't say entirely false, but false for sure. I've been very pleasantly surprised with how you could actually affect change as a freshman, as someone coming into it completely new. And I had this one bill that I was very proud of. It's the Generic Drug Pricing Fairness Act. And every step of the way, there seemed to be hurdles. And there were moments where I was like, I don't know if this is going to get through. But just the power and the ability to, and the privilege to be able to work on this issue and see it through, that's been huge. So that's what I'm most surprised by.
Mm-hmm. I mean, anytime I read a story about you, looked at your campaign, see pictures, you're always smiling. You seem so excited for this opportunity. But what about now? Does any of that optimism dwindle after seeing it? Maybe this saying predates you, but now that you've seen how the sausage gets made, is your positivity and optimism still on the same level?
I wouldn't say my optimism has significantly dwindled, but I do think I've become a bit more understanding of this might not be as clear cut as I thought it was during the campaign, and this won't happen this easily. I hear stories about how it used to be, and I think that makes me optimistic about the future, is that knowing that we're on a turning point in our state and that it can only get better. Until, I don't want to say that things can change within the span of an election cycle, but I do believe we're on this pathway to getting better as a state. And I think compared to how people would describe the past, we're on better footing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. How do people describe the past? Was it very much like the big bosses run everything, everyone else kind of falls in line type of mentality?
Yeah, I think people describe not necessarily having as large of a say in the process. And I think there's this push for more transparency, more communication, that it just didn't seem like it was there previously. I say every single week I go down to Springfield, I learn a lot about now, about what's happening right now, but I learn so much about the history, and it's crazy to think that so much has just changed in the span of a very short few years.
Yeah, I imagine you've learned quite a bit as the state's largest corruption trial was going on while lawmakers were coming back into session. Has there been an example in just, your first legislative session where something didn't happen as easily as you wanted, where you had to back up and go, oh, okay, so this is a little bit more process oriented than I had imagined?
There was, I mentioned the Generic Drug Pricing Fairness Act. that bill has it was not an easy process. But granted, I say that when I know that other legislators have spent years working on issues. So I'm very lucky. I'm going to start off by being expressing my gratitude for it only happening within one single legislative session, which is a huge, huge accomplishment. But like this bill specifically, at literally every single step of the way, there were obstacles that I had to overcome and had to work through, whether it was procedural, whether it was like strategic, whether it was convincing folks of voting in favor of it. And I feel like it's such an amazing thing to come out of this legislative session and be like, hey, I was able to pass this through the House and the Senate, and now it's headed to the governor's desk to be signed. But that was a clear example of me being like, whoa, 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 like things are definitely not as clear cut here. You really got to work on these issues, and you really got to refine a process to get these things out the door.
To be frank, Illinois politics historically, I know this, has this reputation of corruption and backroom dealing. You made it clear that there's evidence that is changing, especially with new House leadership. But have you seen an example when the past bad actions have come to surface?
Yes, definitely. And I think being 24, I was running for office when I was 22. I got elected when I was 23, and now I'm 24. And being younger in this space, and hearing about that history, hearing about how certain policy decisions we have to make now, like especially when it comes to the budget, especially when it comes to paying down certain debts, is because of a failure to do that in the past, is because of a history of bad governance. And I'm very upset about when I hear about these things, because it really sucks. It sucks for my generation. It sucks for future generations. It's not fair that we're having to kind of clean up the problems of the past because someone in the past did not want to pay down our pension obligations, something that was rightfully owed to people but refused to pay into it. Someone didn't want to invest in public education for God knows what reason. And now we are having to deal with the consequences of significantly underfunded public education for decades. But at least we have an opportunity to fix it now. And I think I'm very optimistic that we're on this trend of fixing things.
Yeah, you said something before to the effect that some of these issues are here now because someone in the past was potentially more interested in enriching themselves. Do you feel like there is a generational gap down in Springfield where I imagine, your entire life, you've lived knowing that we are on the precipice of crisis, whether it's financial crisis, socioeconomic or a sociocultural crisis, whether it's a public health crisis. And then you look up at some of these colleagues and you say, well, it's the problems of your generation that have put us here. How do you balance that criticism for some of your older colleagues by still maintaining that optimism and that collaborative spirit?
Yeah, I that's interesting because I've never once thought to blame any of my older colleagues, because I don't believe that they were the ones responsible for these issues. It was different governors in the past, it was different folks in the past, that frankly, at least I don't think I see down there anymore. I think I have high respect for a lot of my older colleagues. I think a lot of them have lived through a lot of this history and have been forced to be bystanders in this history because they were not able to do more. And sometimes I just, I hear the way that things worked out in the past, and I have a lot of respect for the information, the lived experience, and that they have to contribute. And I think they've been very generous about sharing that with me and helping me grow so that, in the future we don't make those mistakes or let someone else make those mistakes.
It's really good to hear from a lawmaker, especially yourself, that there's this feeling that individuals have more of a say, because in the conversations we've had, for so long, former House Speaker Michael Madigan was there, and there was just this sense that everything was top down. If you didn't get the approval from the big boss, or if he was not sort of aligned with what you had to say, that your voice was less heard. So it is good to hear that under new leadership, that there's this feeling of openness and more transparency. The session was supposed to end last week, but lawmakers are still working to pass a state budget. What are the big sticking points there?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd want to say is it was like a self-imposed deadline. So I think they were trying to get us the ducks in order and push us legislators. And we still have some time to nail down this budget, but I think there's lots of in some ways competing interests, in some ways non-competing, and just trying to figure out how best do we help everyone with the limited resources that are there. And I know that taxpayers in the state of Illinois want to see that their money is being spent wisely. So how do we spend wisely in a way that helps us for the future? And I'm very optimistic that now, I said that I think we're turning a new page. We're on this era of good governance. And I do believe now people are looking to see how these decisions and these investments and these appropriations will play out years from now. The biggest thorn in my side has been that maybe sometimes in previous administrations, they've lacked a very future-oriented perspective. But I do think some of the investments and some of the decisions are tailored towards thinking about the future.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in just the last budget, a lot in due to pandemic relief funding, but we saw record investments in social services. You saw the governor trying to get Illinois' financial ducks in a row, making some of those payments, seeing some of those credit upgrades. But when we're thinking about the here and now, what's key for you in your district? What's something you're trying to make sure gets delivered to the northwest suburbs?
I think lots of people come out to live in the northwest suburbs because of our public education, of our schools. I'm very lucky to have benefited from that, to have gone through the public school process, and there's the schools, but then it's also the issue of property taxes and how those just continue to increase and increase. And it's tough to tell people, even at the doors, the reason why we have such good public schools, the reason why you want to move here and raise your kids here is because we have to, the school districts have to levy such high property taxes. But I think the state has a potential to play a bigger role in reducing the property taxes indirectly. We can't do it directly, but indirectly they're supporting schools a bit more. So I'm a big proponent of boosting, our evidence-based formula, making sure that schools are getting more support from the state, helping our municipalities also receive some more support so they could decrease their property tax levy.
Nabila, I don't want to focus on your age too much, but it's such a huge story and such a huge piece of your journey. I mean, when I was 22, 23, 24, I was throwing back Gatorades, McChickens every day trying to get through my thesis. You were running to be a representative, in Springfield. Why, though? Why choose to run for the State House versus, maybe Congress or a local office back in Palatine?
So the way this all started was when I was working on some school board races, trying to get my good friend elected to the school district that, I came out of. And we did it. We won those seats. We were coming into it at a time when there was like this just wave of far right extremism at the school board level. It was, at the state level, at the federal level, like we're seeing it seep into the most local forms of government. And that's where I was like, man, I got to do something to help keep this area safe in the next election cycle. And truthfully, coming into it as a young person, my first thought was, I'm going to help manage or run someone's campaign to flip this seat blue. This area has historically been represented by a Republican. And, my friend and I were talking, and we just didn't like the way things were going. She's like, hey, why don't you run for office? And that's where it started. And then it went to actually running a full-fledged campaign. And I remember thinking, like, I would walk into these rooms of people that were, very accomplished, much significantly older than me, all involved in politics. And I didn't know it then, but I know it now that they were all looking at me being like, who the hell does she think she is walking into this damn room?
Right, and you asking for money, for votes, for belief in these individuals. Did you think you'd win?
People, first of all, didn't believe this area could be flipped to a Democratic seat. And that was the biggest disbelief of like, why would people be running in a competitive primary election if this seat is going to go to a Republican anyways? And I remember that's how they'd cover it. And I was like, I looked at the numbers and I was like, hey, me and my friend were sitting down and we're like, hey, this is doable. Like, we can do this. We just need to work hard. Mm. And that's what we knew we could control. We could control our work ethic. And then the next step was getting past this primary. And I remember people also said the same thing to me. Like, remember, I wear a hijab. I'm 22, 23 at the time. I'm Indian American. I'm Muslim. And there's no hiding any of those aspects of my identity. You know, I wear it all on my sleeve and I talk about it proudly. And there's that aspect of like, can a woman who looks like me win against someone who's white in the primary election against another Democrat? And then can she also go on to unseat a middle-aged white man? That was the kind of thought process people were going through. And lots of people didn't believe it, even until it was like a day before the election. People were still telling me, they're like, good try, you know, good effort. Don't worry about tomorrow. You made already a huge impact. But I was like, we're going to win. Like we're going to do it. And I had to say that whether or not I knew it as a fact, because I had to believe it, because I thought there was a possibility. But we didn't know until the end that, you know, it would actually flip.
Yeah. I mean, every politician is going to court criticism, but flipping a, you know, former Republican district means that come the, you know, the next election cycle, anything that goes wrong in your area will fall on your shoulders and people will say, this is what happens when you elect a Democrat. Are you aware of that? Do you feel that pressure when you travel between Palatine and Springfield?
No one has really said that to me so far, but I hear you. I think it might be coming down the pipeline, and I'm not looking forward to it. But I do think it's a matter of being honest with people about the shortcomings of what might have happened in the budgetary process, the true realities of what I've learned, and I do believe that. And I think like if you communicate that with sincerity, with care, and understanding that like the person is speaking out of a place of difficulty. They are experiencing something, whether it's high property taxes, whether it's prescription drug affordability, whether it's just feeling unheard, that they might be saying that. And I think that is something that I need to continually remind myself of, because even before I was elected, running as a Democrat, people were blaming me for all sorts of things that I never voted on. I never stated I believed. So I'm a bit used to that, but I think it'll be different coming into it when I actually have accountability for some of the decisions that I made. And they're actually votes, you know, actual votes that I took. So I need to make sure. That's why I'm very cognizant throughout the entire process of, if I'm voting on something, I better be able to defend it.
Yeah. I know you give out your card with the things that your office can work on. And you say, if it's not on here, reach out to us. Can you tell us a story about a time somebody reached out to you trying to get some assistance from your office and you were able to help them out?
Yeah, so this one is one of my favorite stories. Someone reached out over email and they, you know, were wondering if they could qualify for the senior property tax freeze and how that could work and what steps need to be taken. So my wonderful chief of staff, she handled that situation. And then later we were getting these emails about people that might potentially have unclaimed property in their district, in our district. And I come across his name and I was like, hey, like, you know, I looked at the email and it said he has $20,000 in unclaimed property from his mother's inheritance that he just didn't know about. And I gave him a call and I was like, I know this sounds like a spam call, but I swear it's to the state treasurer's office. It's the iCash program. And he was just like in shock. And this is a man that was he's in a financially tough situation. He needed some support. And turns out there's, you know, $20,000 just out there that he just has never claimed because he didn't know about it. So he came into our office, our district office, our team got him sorted with all the paperwork, you know, connected him with the folks at the treasurer's office. And hopefully that money will be coming in a check any day now. But that is one of the coolest examples where I've seen how strong district operations could really help and affect people's lives. And I'm not saying everyone's got $20,000 in unclaimed property out there. I wish, but that was a moment where you recognize the importance of community and just recognizing his name in that email and being like, hey, this is someone that he needed help. Now we could help him in a bigger way, just not because we did it, but because there's a system out there or money out there that we can be that connector for. So a lot of the job is just connecting.
Mm. Obviously, you got a Democratic supermajority down in Springfield, but there's still some nitty gritty to work through. You're still working on the budget, the school board map. There'll be the veto session in the fall. But what are you hoping to accomplish or do differently in the next legislative session?
I've learned so much about the process. I think the biggest thing that I didn't have the luxury of doing earlier was, you know, I was running for office the entire summer prior to this legislative session. I didn't know if I'd get elected, so I couldn't even think about what it'd be like after. But now I know I am guaranteed another legislative session. So this entire summer, I'm going to do a lot of the district work, make sure I'm talking to folks, going to their doors, asking what I can help them with. But then the other half is preparing for the next legislative session, engaging stakeholders early on, and trying to use all the good tips and tricks that I learned this past legislative session. I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of prescription drug affordability. That was the number one issue among Democrats, Republicans, independents in my community. So I want to make sure that's at the forefront. There's still some work that could be done around gun safety. There's work that could be done, especially, something that I didn't expect coming into this, but an issue that I'm very passionate about now is care for our community with developmental disabilities and care for their caretakers. And there's a lot of progress that we're trying to make just within this budgetary process, but there is a lot more to go. And that is an example of decades of underinvestment and underfunding necessary resources like care for our DD community.
Mm-hmm. Your story has probably opened up the imaginative possibility for so many people. As a young person, as a young woman, as a Muslim, as a child of immigrants, would you encourage other young people to read your story, to also consider running for their own local or statewide offices?
Yes, definitely. I think, even at the age of 24, people laugh at me when I say this down in Springfield, I don't feel as young. I hate to say that. I feel like I'll get really, I don't feel as young because there is a whole generation of folks that are on the other end of Gen Z that are dealing with problems that I don't fully understand. And I think it's important that we continue to have younger voices, even younger voices, occupy these spaces, whether it's through advocacy, through lobbying, through being elected, all forms of government, federal, state, local. And that is how we can make sure our perspectives are being heard.
Nabila Syed is the state rep for the 51st House District. Thank you for making time for CityCast Chicago today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before I let you go, a little bit of news. Starting today, all indoor park district pools will be closed until at least June 23rd as lifeguards move to the beaches, which reopen this weekend. Last summer, fewer than half of park pools opened due to a lifeguard shortage. Attorney General Kwame Raoul released a scathing 700-page report detailing the Illinois Catholic Church's cover-up of decades of sexual abuse. The investigation found nearly 2,000 children were abused by some 450 members of the church across Illinois. A Save-A-Lot near Washington Park abruptly closed this week after a break-in over the weekend, store rep said. Yellow Banana, the company that operates the store, has been directing customers to its newest Save-A-Lot in Inglewood. And some good news. This Friday, I'm hosting Jay Bambi's Hot Boys and Company, a night of music and vibes at Empty Bottle in Ukrainian Village. Come out and hear from Manesi, Heavy Crowns, MFM Mellow, and more. Hey, the first of the month is coming up, and you know what that means. Yes, rent is due. For all of you renters out there, we're going to be talking to a tenants' rights organization about some common questions like, what is your landlord supposed to fix, and are there any limits to rent increase? If you've got questions, let us know so we can get answers. Text us at 773-780-0246. As always, we appreciate you for listening. Make sure you're following along with our daily newsletter, Hey Chicago. Subscribe now at chicago.citycast.fm. I'm here bright and early tomorrow. I will talk to you then. Peace. All right, that's it. You can go on to your next podcast or brush your teeth or whatever the hell you're going to do next.